So, before the 2020 global pandemic, um, the notion of having organizations be 100% remote almost seemed like an experiment. Um, you know, you will read about this in articles, right, in Harvard Business Review or the New York Times. But the pandemic forced millions of workers into going remote. And while for many companies, it seemed like a really good idea on paper, the reality is that it affected the organizational culture more than you can imagine. So, I want to talk about the strategies you can implement today to create culture in a decentralized world. During the global pandemic of 2020, I came to the realization that the world had changed and we were never going to be living life like we used to. You probably came to the same conclusion. If you fast forward to today, almost half of the population, at least in the US, are working remotely, some partially and others in full capacity. But is remote work good for us, or does it hurt us more than we think? So I think when I think about the advantages and disadvantages of working remotely, right? On one hand, you have the flexibility in time, but on the other hand, it does seem like you are working all the time, right? Others say that it eliminates commute, but others might say that home becomes too connected with work. One might say that you kind of learn by working remotely. You learn to use other channels to perform your work. But others might say that you become isolated and you lack those interpersonal relationships that make that make up for that organizational culture. What I believe is that one of the main issues with people in an organization working almost 100% remotely is that as time goes by, people start working in their own island, right? Creating their own idealization about what the organization is or what the organization believes in, even. In addition to this, as people join the organization, especially entry-level employees, they become more even more isolated because they don't have that human connection to and that onboarding experience becomes very transactional and virtual. So in order to bring people together, for them to believe that they're all pushing towards the same direction, you need to build into your organizational culture. Okay, so let's start with the definition of culture, or let me rephrase that: organizational culture. Organizational culture is the collection of values, expectations, practices that guide and inform the actions of all the team members within an organization, right? Organizational culture has to do about building a community that that believes in a certain set of values and practices, and they all became, they all subscribe to those. Hence, they'll kind of like, work in a similar fashion towards the same objective. When you lack of this sense of community, of culture, then your organization starts becoming siloed, and you start losing your identity as an organization. So that brings us to the main subject of this piece, which is let's discuss about the strategies of building this organizational culture in a decentralized world that we live in. So we're going to look at a methodology that I like to call putting your values in practice, or BIP, and it takes 3 steps to put this method together. Step 1 is defining your values. Step 2 is communicate them. And step 3 is putting them in practice. So let's start with the first step, defining your values. So your values are a set of characteristics, adjectives almost, that you should want people to agree with and subscribe to, and everything they do in the day-to-day are around those values. Now, you should never look for perfection. You should never have people in your team that everyone follows the values to the T. You always want to have diversity in beliefs and in way of working and styles, because some of the greatest ideas spark from obviously being able to have a safe space to have conversation, but also from having different ideas. But you do want to have some sort of like bar in which measures, once I define my values, in measures, okay, how are people subscribers to those values? Do they understand it? Do they follow them or not? And do they believe in them, which is very important. So how do you define your values? Okay, so you will meet with your management team, for example, and think about those employees that you believe that represent what your organization represents. Now, this doesn't necessarily need to be, defining values doesn't need to be a task for the entire organization. It can be also for your department. But think about one person, right? Let's call this person X. So maybe the person X is someone that you love working with them because they are accountable, because they are fun to work with, because they believe in teamwork, right? And maybe another person on your team might say, well, I love working with person Y because I believe that they are also a very good team player, but they think outside of the box. And I love that they are very, they're not afraid of speaking their truth and raising their hand where there is an issue. And that's very important for the organization. So you put the list of all the characteristics of attributes that define those people that you love working with. And once you have the list of those words, you start going through them with your team and start defining really what represents your brand or your organization. And you want to end with a list of between 3 to 5 values, okay? Once you have the list of words, you want to create a short description of why you believe that is a value of your corporation. So, for example, at Devs United, we believe that teamwork is essential and it's one of our values. And we believe that because we believe that teamwork exceeds individual efforts. Teamwork will always be more important than individual efforts. Now, individuals are very important for the organization, but we believe that teamwork is what brings us together as an organization and helps us customers, right? So for each value, you're going to create a short description of why you believe that value represents your organization. Okay, so let's go into step 2, which is communicate your values. So this is very important. And I want you to understand that when I say communicate your values, it doesn't mean go in a presentation, do a motivational speech a la William Wallace, right? And everyone is gonna cheer you on and follow your dreams. Communicating your values has to do with like first setting the stage, right? So first explaining to your team, again, that could be the entire staff of your organization or your department, why you believe these values to be true to your organization. That's why I was talking about earlier about creating a short description of each of the words that represent your values. Okay. But it does not end there. You're gonna go into a meeting, you're gonna communicate, hey, these are values that represent our organization, this is why. But you need to continue to send that message. Okay, so everything maybe if you have a bi-weekly meeting with your staff, maybe gamifying a little bit, play a little game, to say, okay, who wants to talk about the values, or maybe again you can create, for example, material that has our values. It can be like coffee mugs, it can be like wallpaper for that. But make sure that people understand what the values are, and make sure that people agree with them, because the most important part is if people agree with your values, everyone is going to start kind of like thinking through before, when they are working on the today, before maybe talking to a client, they're going to think about what the values represent, and everyone's going to start kind of behaving towards the same values. And again, we're not trying to make people think the same or act the same, but we're trying to at least have a general consensus of this is what the company stands for. And that's going to create, in a decentralized world, a world where everyone is connected from different locations, that's going to create a sense of unity. But this is where step 3 comes in, which is the most important step, I believe, which is putting your values in practice. So, to put your values in practice, it's actually quite easy task, but it requires a little bit of discipline. Okay, so you have 5 values that you have determined, for example, 3 or 4 or 5 that you have outlined. Okay, let's go with 4. You outline 4 values that you feel like your organization represents. Why you have communicated to a team, right? But now you want to bring the team together, right? You need a reason to bring your team your team together, because again, like that's what we want to do, is how do we create purpose in our organization. So this is what I call putting the values in practice. So it's very simple. First of all, you want to have values in practice committee. Okay, so typically when it comes to like activities related to values or activities related to bringing people together, the misconception is that the responsibility falls into the human resources department, or that it falls into the managers, right? But if you think about it, who makes up the culture of an organization? It's the people. In fact, as I was saying in step 1, you create the values based on the people that you work with. So the people that work in your organization, that may or may not be in managerial positions, that may or may not be in HR, everyone is part of creating a culture of unity and around your values. Okay, so what you're gonna do is gonna create a committee. You can send an invite You can nominate people to be part of a committee, or you can ask people to participate. I guarantee you that if people believe in your values, they're gonna want to participate. Okay? So you want to, that's where diversity comes into place. You want to grab people from different locations. If you have offices in different countries, you want to have people in the committee from different physical locations. You want to have people from different gender identities, for example, as well. This is where diversity becomes more powerful for everyone, because now our we are including everyone from different backgrounds, right? So our culture becomes even more united. Okay, what is this committee do? So they will basically grab the 4 values that you define. Let's say there were 4, and they will create activities. This could be once a month. This could be once a quarter. I would recommend maybe once every other month to begin with, surrounded each of these values. Okay, so for example, if one of your values is community, one of your activities could be that each team on the different location has to get together and conduct some sort of charity activity, for example. If one of your values is thinking outside of the box, maybe one of the months you can organize a hackathon when everyone gets together to solve a problem. Okay, so what you are accomplishing there by putting your values in practice is a couple of things. First, you're making people part of your organizational culture and of your values. You're not making this a task of a HR department or of a managers. You're making everyone involved in this activity. Number 2, what you're doing is you are putting the values in people's mind. Okay, so they are breathing and living these values. Okay, and that's again very important for an organization. And number 3, you are bringing people together for that purpose. Okay, so some events might be the whole company's joined online. Some events might be hybrid with some, like for example, if it's a charity event, like I said, the different locations go do their own thing, right? And they can share out, what they did in the activity. So the committee is in charge of planning these activities, 1 per value, okay? And then what you can do is start rotating this committee. So maybe every 6 months you rotate the members, so other people is gonna want to join. So you continue to refresh that. But it doesn't end there. Okay, there are more things that you can do once you have defined your values, and you're gonna start realizing this, because you're gonna start realizing, oh, now I can also evaluate, how part of someone's performance could be tied to how I believe, how the organization believes that this person subscribes or not to their values, for example. Or you can hire someone, add questions in your interview guide around your values. So once you define those values, see how important it is that once you define those values, it's not only putting them in practice for the sake of bringing the organization together, but you're going to start realizing that you're going to start using these values for multiple purposes. So that brings us to my conclusion. Okay, so to conclude this segment, I'm gonna finish by saying when I started Devs United back in 2015, I always had the vision to create a company where we had no boundaries, because we had team members in Argentina and in the US. I was always a believer that it didn't matter where you were. If your team is aligned and pushing towards the same direction, you can accomplish anything. But a few months later, I realized that even though I have set that vision for the company, people weren't talking to each other, or they have different styles of working. And soon enough, I realized that if we didn't have a set of guidelines to how we wanted to work together, or we as visionaries of a company, what we believed in, people didn't have a guiding principle to follow. So then we started defining the values of the organization and talking with people, and soon enough, we created a culture where people have an identity. People believe in what we believe on, and people help other people that join the organization um, with that um, with that introduction of our values. So I hope you enjoy this section. I hope you can put this in practice in your organization. And just remember 3 steps: define your values, communicate them, and put them in practice. Goodbye.